we're going to continue in our function standard 2 with our fourth lesson. And the fourth lesson is following the same thing as we've done, which is finding the slope and the y-intercept. But this time we're going to find it in a table. So first lesson, we just learned about what slope is. Second lesson, we found it in a graph. Third lesson, we found it in an equation. And now we're going to look at it in a table. So 2 questions that you need to ask yourself as we go through this is, how do you find slope in a table? And how do you find the y-intercept in the table? And I will show you some examples of where you find that slope and where you find that y-intercept. So when you get done with this video and done with this lesson, you should be able to tell anyone, how do you find slope in a table and how do you find slope in a y-intercept? So let's get in here. Let me go. Okay, so in a table here, or a chart, however you'd like to use it. So in a table, you're going to look for slope, which, as we've talked about over and over, is rise over run. But when we're looking at a table, we have to look at it more as the change of the y over the change of the x. And again, rise is the y. So if you think about it, y-axis goes up and down, so that's your rise. This is your y-axis. And then this is your run, the change, and that triangle means change in math. Your run is going horizontally. So that is your x-axis. So it's exactly the same thing as rise over run, but it makes more sense to say it as the change of the y over the change of the x when it comes to a table. Now, when we look for our change of the y, change of the x, you're going to look at a table. And I'm already going to tell you these are all linear, so they all have a constant rate of change or a slope. You can pick any 2 points you want, so it doesn't matter. Just like you do on a graph. So when I asked you to find a slope on a graph, you pick 2 points to make a slope triangle with. So I'm going to pick, let's go with these 2 points. Okay, and if you pick those 2 points on the y side, you have to pick those 2 points on the x side. Notice it's labeled, x is always on the left side, y is always on the right side. So change means how much is it changing by. So if I start at 4 and I go up to 7, that means it's a positive change of 3. Because it's 5, 6, 7. If you look over here, we have 12. We start up and it's going up to 21. So again, that's a positive change. And 12 up to 20 is 8 plus 1 is 9. So my change is 9 on the x side. Now when you write it, notice that the y goes on the side first. So your right side, your change of the y's was positive 3, and the change of the x was 9. Now, you write that in simplest form. So the simplest form of that would be, we can divide both sides by 3, which would have been 1/3. Now, if you would have chosen these 2 points, the top 2, I think you would have gotten 1/3 right away. Again, it doesn't matter which ones you choose. So if I would have picked the top 2, so the change of the y from 0 to 1 is a positive 1. Change of the x from 0 to 3 is a positive 3. Now, I've told you over and over that you find your y-intercept, and we write it as a coordinate pair, and x is always 0. So when you're looking at a table, you're just going to look for where x is 0. And if you're lucky enough, it's right there in the table, so it's a right there answer. If you're not, then you have to go search for it. But in this one, x is 0 right here, and y is 0. So that means the point x is 0, y is 0 is our y-intercept. So it's going through the origin. And then the last step is to put it into the correct equation format. And you learned that in last lesson. So again, here's your correct format. So remember, y stays as the variable. M is your slope, which is in the lowest term is 1/3. X, and then plus your y-intercept, remember, is the y value here of 0. Okay, next example. Again, any 2 you would like. This time I'll pick the top 2 right away. So the change there from 3 to 4 is a positive 1. Change from 0 to 3 is a positive 3. Again, change of the y over change of the x. Rise over run. I always joke that, why do I have to rise in the morning? And you always run from your x. So that's how, if you want to remember it that way, you rise. Why do I have to rise in the morning? A lot of teenagers think that, and then you run from your x. So change of the y was 1. Change of your x was 3. Our slope is 1/3 again. If you had picked two different ones, just to prove it here, we'll pick this one and this one. So 7 to 10 is an increase of 3, or a change of 3. 12 to 21, we had that up there, as a change of 9. So that would have been 3 over 9, which we know already is 1/3. Your coordinate point, remember, is always 0, comma. Here, I'll put that. So 0, comma, and then we go look for it. So x has to be 0 here. So if we look in our table, we're lucky enough that x is already 0. We look across, y is 3, so our coordinate point is 0, 3. That's where the graph is going to cross the the y-axis. Your equation format, I like just to write it over and over and over and over, because you will be writing it over and over and over in algebra. So y stays as a variable, because that's always varying. Your slope, again, was 1/3. Your x is your other variable. And then b, your y-intercept this time, is 3. Okay, next example. Same two questions, the same ones I started this video with, is what is the slope and how do you find it, and what is the y-intercept and how do you find it. So change of y over change of x. Pick any 2 points. So notice this time the change starts at 10 and it goes down to 9. So that is going down 1. The change here, oops, is at 3, goes up to 4, so that's a positive 1. So your slope technically, remember, it's change of y, so the one on the right side first, -1 over 1. Your slope, we're not as lucky this time. Notice, I'm sorry, your y-intercept, not as lucky this time, because notice that there's no x being 0. This is when you're going to have to force it to become 0. So you're going to follow the pattern that we already talked about, and you're just going to follow it backwards. So if this x values are going up by 1, if I work backwards, that means it's got to go down by 1. So that one had to be 2, because 2 to 3 is positive 1. This would have to be 1, and this would have to be 0. Okay, so you're going to extend your table here to make it work. Now, this side was going down by 1, so that means if I work backwards, I have to go up. You have to reverse your idea. So this would have to be 11, because 11 to 10 is going down. Then this would have to be 12, and this would have to be 13. So even though I didn't have a right there answer of what the y-intercept is, you can work it backwards following the change of the y of the change of the x to make it work. So again, notice, just check, 0 to 1 is positive 1, 1 to 2 is positive 1, 2 to 3 is positive 1. So that is still working. And this one's supposed to go down by 1. So 13 to 12, 12 to 11, 11 to 10. So perfect. Again, the y-intercept, it was 0, 13. Put it into our equation format. So y equals, now you can write it like that, but anything divided by 1 is still that value. So mathematically, we usually just put -1, x plus the y-intercept was 13. The last one for this video. So change of the y, again, by the time you get done with this, you should be able to quickly tell me how to find the slope. Put change of the y over change of the x. Look at any problem you want. We'll just use this top 2. So if you're taking 3 and you're going down, so I hear negative already, to 1, that means you're going down 2. If you're here at 1 and you go to 2, that is going up 1. So your change of your y is -2. Your change of your x is +1. So my slope is -2 over 1. Unfortunately, notice that we don't have a 0 in our x, so we have to work at it. The good news is we don't have to work very hard, because if you think about this, if this is going up by 1, if I work backwards, we're already at 0. And if this side, the y values are decreasing by 2, if I work it backwards, that means I'm going to add 2, which makes this 5. Check my math. 5 to 3 is a -2 change, so there's my y-intercept. So 0, 5 is my y-intercept. Last step is to put it into correct format. So remember, y stays as y. My slope, and you can put it over 1, but -2 divided by 1, of course, is -2. So I'll simplify it. And then x, and then my y-intercept was a +5.